Welcome to the Self Love Sanctuary. I'm Erica Thomas. Helen Thomas couldn't be with us today. She had a patient she needed to see. So, I wanted to talk to you about some of our barriers to self compassion, some of our fears and concerns about self compassion. In general, I always feel like self compassion is a positive thing. And I feel like, and I do have people tell me that it's a positive thing for them. They say, "Oh, I decided to take this course because it had self-compassion in the title, and I felt like I could probably use more of that." So, in general, I always assume that people are feeling positively about it. But I realize that that's not always true. Sometimes people have concerns. There may be some negative connotations or some beliefs we have that are in conflict with the idea of having self-compassion. Honestly, we're taught the value of being kind to other people, but we are not taught the value of being kind to ourselves. In fact, sometimes we're taught that being kind to ourselves could even be detrimental. And so I wanted to talk about some of those beliefs today that might be getting in the way of us practicing self-compassion or wanting to practice self-compassion. Um, so when it comes to kind of moving ahead in our own lives, we're really taught to kind of have a stiff upper lip, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. It's a That's really the message that we get about how to treat ourselves and how to move ourselves through our lives. And self-compassion is more about being mindful of your feelings, acknowledging your feelings, soothing in, comforting yourself in the same way that you would soothe or comfort a friend who is having difficult emotions. And when we think about doing that for ourselves, sometimes we can think of it as a weakness. It's like we feel like, well, if I'm going to be more mindful of my feelings, then that's going to make me weak because I don't have time to sit around, coddling myself or soothing my feelings. I have stuff to do. I have goals in the world, and we might feel like being compassionate is going to stand in the way of us reaching those goals, or it's going to take away our motivation to reach those goals. So, if you stop and think about it, what are some of the beliefs that you have that might feel in conflict with the idea of self compassion? As I already mentioned, we might have one belief that I just have to, like, being strong means having a stiff upper lip means not letting anything get to me. So that might be one belief. And self compassion might make me weak or soft. And so let's talk about some other beliefs, and then I'll kind of talk about a little bit of the research around self compassion. Um, we might worry that self compassion is going to make us self absorbed. It might be selfish or even narcissistic to have self compassion. We're supposed to be concerned about other people. We're supposed to be helping other people. And having self compassion is all about me and isn't that selfish or self absorbed. Um, Maybe we worry that self compassion is kind of like having self pity. It'll cause me to wallow um, and and be so focused on my own self pity that I'm not able to kind of get out of it. So I want you to know that, first of all, um, the research shows that self compassion actually makes us stronger and more resilient because when we are able to acknowledge our own emotions and self soothe, then we have more strength and resilience to move through difficult emotions and difficult times. Um, and it actually makes us less self-absorbed because we're really standing strong in our own ability to self-soothe and move through those difficult emotions rather than maybe being very reactive with other people, projecting our feelings out onto other people, um, or relying on other people to to either take on those emotions or help us move through those emotions. So we just have a lot more internal resources when we practice self-compassion. So it actually makes us a lot stronger, and it makes us more resilient. It makes us less self-centered, and it gives us more capacity to have compassion for other people. So the research really does show that people who practice self-compassion are actually more compassionate with others. So self-compassion is really a strength, even though our initial reaction might feel like it's a weakness. So some other fears that we might have about self-compassion is the mindfulness component. And if I'm maybe I don't want to be more aware of my difficult emotions, like our first instinct is to push away those difficult emotions, and we don't necessarily want to become more aware of them and be more mindful and sit with those difficult emotions. We might feel like if I open up the floodgates, then I'm just going to be overwhelmed by all of these emotions. And the reality is that the strongest way, the only way to overcome difficult emotions and difficult situations is to move through it. I think we've all seen the result in our lives when we're holding on to something like grief or sadness or even anger, and we're just kind of trying to go around it, and then if you've been through any kind of healing process in your life, you know that really the true healing came when you were finally able to move through that emotion. And honestly, I think the longer that we hang on to those difficult emotions and try and push them aside or try and go around them and avoid them, the longer that goes on, the more pain that builds up. So, practicing self compassion and practicing moving through the difficult emotions on a regular basis actually makes it a lot less painful because, we touch in on, oh, this thing bugged me today, and, uh, and then we're able to release it and move on with our day. However, when we hold on to something for years and years, we resist a lot of little things during the day. I mean, you may have had this experience all through the day. It's like something bugs me here, something bugs me there, and I just keep pushing it aside and pushing it aside, and then maybe I do the same thing the next day, and at the end of the week, it's kind of we get to a point where we just kind of explode on someone. Someone does the smallest thing and it's like the last straw. And and we I know for me, I can feel that I've overreacted, and then I feel bad about overreacting, but a lot of things were building up over the week. And so when I have a regular daily practice of dealing with those things each day or even throughout the day, then I can move through them, and it's kind of like cleaning house, right? You sweep the floor each day, then you start the next day with a fresh, clean space. Um, so even though our initial instinct is to avoid those difficult emotions, when we practice self-compassion, the emotions it's not as difficult as we might think because, we're being really gentle and compassionate with ourselves and we have tools to support ourselves. And things don't build up in the same way. So we don't have nearly as many instances where everything is just overwhelming. And then over time, you do start to find that something that would have been overwhelming in the past now feels manageable. maybe still really, really hard. I'm not gonna say that those really hard things don't happen in life, God forbid, someone still might die, you might get cancer, like all of those things that we think of as really, really hard. It's not that they won't happen, but you will have a lot more resources to deal with them. And it's not going to feel as overwhelming as it may have before you started your self compassion practice. And I've definitely had that experience where, something really difficult happened and I just thought to myself, thank God this didn't happen like 3 years ago or even 1 year ago because it would have felt unbearable. Whereas now I have so many more tools that even though it's really hard, I can manage it. Like, I know that I can get through this. I have a strength that I didn't have before. Um, so another big concern about self-compassion I really want us to address is about motivation. We might feel like, well, I have high standards for myself. I have ambitions. I have things that I want to accomplish. And how do I motivate myself to accomplish those things if I'm sitting around, feeling my emotions and um, then my whole life is going to become just about how do I feel my emotions and deal with my emotions. And uh, I might lose that motivation. I might lose those ambitions. It's going to be harder to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. A lot of times we do motivate ourselves with self-criticism, fear. Um, let's talk specifically about the weight issue. The majority of the time, when you see those ads for like a new weight loss program or something, what do you hear from the people about what motivated them to make the change? You hear them say stuff like, "Oh, I saw a picture of myself and I had gotten so big and I just knew I had to do something about it." Or, I couldn't get down on the floor and play with my kids anymore, and I just felt so terrible, so it's a lot of like fear and bad feelings. And in my own story also, I had somewhat of that experience. I was motivated to make changes and to lose weight because I went to my college reunion and I was on the crew team in college and I really loved to row. But when I went to that reunion, I was so big, I didn't feel comfortable to get in the boat, and I didn't feel like I could row, and they had a reunion row, so I had my other classmates, other women that I had rowed with in college, and they got in the boat and got to go out and row on the river, and I had to watch. And so for me, it was sadness and fear that initially um, gave me that motivation to say, I am going to lose this weight and I am going to get back into shape so that I can get in a boat and row again. So that was the initial motivator for me. And I had had other points in my life where I maybe looked at a picture of myself or something or had an experience and I was like, oh, this just isn't going to work for me. I have to do something, um I have to take better care of my body. However, the thing that sustained me throughout the process of losing the weight, because this moment when I saw my classmates rowing it was just a moment in time. And yes, I felt bad in that moment and I wanted to do something to fix it, but the fix wasn't immediate, right? The weight loss involved a lot of change. It involved work. It involved going to the gym, changing my eating habits, teaching myself how to eat more vegetables, how to eat healthier foods. And that happened over the period of a couple of years. And and that continues to be a process of mine. Then my body changed and I gained some weight back and have to learn more about how to take care of my body and how to feed myself. So it's a process. This isn't something that the change happens in an instant, right? And what sustains me through that process is the practice of self compassion. because there are times when you feel discouraged. There are times when you feel like you're not making any progress. There are times when you feel like you're going backwards. And through all of that, it is the practice of self-compassion that gets me through all of that. So it hasn't taken away my motivation, and I don't think that it does. In fact, the research shows that it doesn't. The research shows that people who practice self-compassion are able to accomplish more of their goals. They're happier in their lives, and they're more motivated because fear and sadness is a very poor motivator. It can it can feel like it can create adrenaline and feel like a big push in the beginning, but it doesn't sustain you through the process of achieving a goal. Once at some point the adrenaline comes down, and then we feel kind of like, oh, well, is it really that important? You know, Maybe it's so much easier to stop at the fast food restaurant on the way home from work than to go home and cook. And, so we lose sight of our goals and we lose our motivation to continue to work towards them. But when I practiced self compassion, then I had that motivation because I was like, well, yeah, I could stop at the fast food restaurant, but I know that's not going to be the most nutritious thing for my body. And that's not what's really going to nourish me. And so actually, even though it's work to go home and cook, in the end, I'll feel like I did something really nourishing for myself. And that's a big motivator. That'll feel really good. Maybe cooking the dinner is feels like a big effort and I won't be so happy while I'm doing it, but once I sit down to have a healthy meal that I made for myself, I know that that will feel better, than the fast food, the more immediate solution. So in that way, self-compassion is really is a motivator for us to do those positive things for ourselves. It's the difference between the instant gratification and working towards a longer term gain, right? So self compassion is more of a longer term gain rather than the instant gratification of, I'm going to stop at the fast food restaurant and I'll have my dinner right now. I'll go home, I'll cook my dinner, and then I'll sit down and eat a healthy meal. And in that, even though that takes longer and more effort, it's it's more of a long-term benefit to myself. Um, and also, remind yourself that if you're not reaching your goals around eating or weight loss or whatever your goals are, um, if you're not reaching those goals right now, then what do you have to lose by trying something a little bit different? And one of the tools that I use that I learned from another teacher of mine is try it for the short term. Just give yourself permission to try it as an experiment. Say, okay, maybe for 1 month or 3 months, whatever feels manageable to you, I'm going to practice self compassion as a way of working towards my goals. And if it's not working, then, you can go back to the old way, trying to push yourself, beat yourself up, scare yourself into doing something different. Um, but maybe try a self-compassion experiment for the next month or two and see if you start to notice the difference. And we will talk more later. I could do a whole video about how to set compassionate goals for yourself. That is something that we will do. And if you have other questions about that, please post them in the comments, because that will really help us know what kinds of things you guys want to hear about. And then another concern or fear about self-compassion, a lot of us, well, I know that I am very much a people pleaser, and I know there are many people in the world like me. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And so if that is you, there may be a fear that if I take my attention off of other people and I start focusing on having self-compassion, which doesn't mean that I'm going to ignore other people, not at all. In fact, as I said before, it probably means I'll be more compassionate with other people. But it also might mean that I'll have a little more boundaries around the time that I give to other people, the things that I'm willing to do for other people. It might mean that instead of me doing something for someone else that they could do for themselves, I might be take that time to practice some self-compassion, make sure that I have time to do my journaling, make sure that, I have time to do my meditation and the self-care things that keep me going during the day. And but there might be a fear that if I say no to someone else, um in order to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, that then they won't love me anymore, or, that I won't be accepted. They'll leave me. So those can be very ingrained fears that we learn in early childhood. We might grow up with this idea that, people like me because of what I do for them. And people stick around because of what I do, what I give them, or, how I help them. And if I'm not only focused on helping them anymore, then they're going to go away. And, the reality is that might happen. There might be some people in your life who are, only around because of what they feel like they get out of the relationship, and those people might go away. However, I bet that there are a lot of people in your life who are around just because they genuinely, care about you. They know that you care about them. There's a lot of genuine love and care between you. And I think you'll discover that not as many people go away as we're afraid of. At least that's what I have discovered in my life. Um, and the key, I think, is just start taking it small. You don't have to say no in big ways. You don't, if it's something that's just too scary for you, then that's okay. That's not the one to work with. You start working with self-compassion in small pieces. So maybe just start asking for what you want in little ways. Like, when you order a meal at a restaurant, asking for it the way you want. Ask for no onions on your burger, or when you go out with friends and they say, what movie do you want to see? Maybe feeling confident enough to speak up and say, "Oh, actually, I would like to see this movie," or "I would like to go to this restaurant," or "What if we did this?" That situation where you're with a group of friends, and or even with your family, and it's like, "Well, where do you want to eat?" "I don't know. Where do you want to eat?" That kind of conversation. Maybe that's a point where you start practicing jumping in and saying, "Oh, I want to eat here," or "I want to do this." Um, just start putting yourself out there in little ways of acknowledging that you have your own ideas about what you want and what you need, because practicing self-compassion is also about acknowledging your own wants and needs, and asking for that. And maybe people will say, "No, I don't like that restaurant. I don't want to go there." And that's okay too. You guys can compromise. It doesn't mean we go to the opposite extreme of my way or the highway. It just means that I'm putting my thoughts out there about what I would like. Um, and so it can be in the conversation. Um, So those are kind of some of the main concerns about self-compassion. If you have other concerns or fears about practicing self-compassion, please leave them in the comments. I would love to hear from you. I think this is an important part of the conversation as we're starting to shift from the way that we are kind of normal relationship with ourselves that is based on a lot of self-criticism and fear, as we're starting to shift into a more compassionate relationship with ourselves. I think it's really important to acknowledge some of our fears and concerns about what that might mean and how that might affect our relationships with other people or with our goals in our life, or or even the relationship that we have, the balance that we have with ourselves. So also, if you like this video, please subscribe to our channel, and Helen and I will be back together next week to talk to you some more about this intersection of self-compassion and Ayurveda and weight loss and healthy habits and all of those things. So please take good care, and thank you for listening today.